140 nations lined up against Iran after Tehran threatened Hormuz again. Let that sink in. The mullahs trying to hold the global economy hostage, and President Trump turned the bluff into a public humiliation. And wait until you hear the line about sea mines and negotiators desperate for cash. Quote, "We get zero oil from Iran, zero." Tim Burchett told Joe Rogan flat out, that's the part that should hit every family at the pump. Tehran jerks the Strait of Hormuz around. Speculators and cartel players shake the money tree, and American truckers get slammed with higher costs anyway. Now watch Trump break that racket from both ends. Sanctions crush Iran's cash. 145 nations corner the regime at the UN. And allies start routing crude around Hormuz so the mullahs lose the chokehold they've abused for years. And also breaking tonight, near record tungsten prices are colliding with a new push in Washington to rebuild the U.S. critical mineral supply chain, with tungsten now treated as a tungsten national security priority for fighter jets, tanks, missiles, drones, and ammunition. The United States has seen no U.S. commercial tungsten mining since 2015. And President Trump's Project Vault includes a $12 billion strategic stockpile and $30 billion domestic production, while the Pentagon has directed millions towards restarting U.S. tungsten production. Vault Strategic Mining, trading as KNOX in Canada and KNXFF in the United States, is reviving historic tungsten assets in mining-friendly U.S. jurisdictions, including proven former mines in Nevada's Great Basin. The district carries a USGS estimate of roughly 168,000 tons of tungsten oxide and an estimated in-ground value of $30 to $50 billion. Make sure you check out the Next News Intel briefing that's been prepared for you. It's linked below if you'd like to find out more. Now, Chevron met Iraqi Prime Minister Ali al-Zaidi in Houston and got told to accelerate. Read that again. Iraq isn't waiting around for Tehran's next threat. It's speeding up production and bypass routes right now. And that's where the story gets deadly for Iran's leverage, so I'm going to pull up the receipts. Trump's sanctions squeeze Iran as 145 UN nations align against Tehran's blockade. The economic front of the Iran war just produced a number Tehran can't spin. 145 nations at the UN have now aligned against the regime. This is big news.
Well, it's not just an intensifying military campaign. The Trump administration is also ramping up the economic pressure on Iran. So this comes as U.S. oil companies are looking for ways to cut their dependency on the Strait of Hormuz, which will ultimately help hurt the Iranians the most. In the meantime, Edward Lawrence has the part of the story that we're looking at now from the White House. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Dana. Yeah, and you know, the U.S. has now galvanized 75% of the United Nations against Iran. This is the third tip of the spear. You've got the weapons part, you've got sanctions, and now you have global support to keep oil flowing.
We now have a UN record, 145 countries that have aligned with us that Iran is in absolute violation of international law. You cannot, as part of a conflict, hold the rest of the world's economies hostage to get your way in a negotiation or a conflict. You can't throw sea mines in international waters, indiscriminately attack civilian shipping, and attack your neighbors the way that they have.
So the country is signing on to a resolution that's saying it's not okay to mine the strait or charge a toll, getting out of the way of U.S. sanctions. The ambassador believes that Iran's currency is collapsing and internal pressure mounting.
I say this a little bit in jest, but I think the Iranians are more scared of Scott Bessent than they are Pete Hegseth right now. Because if you see them when they come to these negotiations, it's money, 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 cash, cash, cash that they
So you think the sanctions
need.
Are working then?
Oh, they absolutely are working.
So now Kipler says that crossings through the strait hit a 3-week low. 8 ships in the past 24 hours. U.S. companies now trying to make plans to transport oil around that part of the world. A Chevron executive tells Fox Business they will sign a memorandum of understanding today with Iraq to enter into 2 Iraqi oil fields and doing studies to move oil from Iraq north around the strait, possibly through the Mediterranean Sea. This is all meant to add that global oil supply, avoiding the issues. Now, oil prices, WTI, is about $80 a barrel. We'd like to see that lower, and that's what the president and these companies are trying to push for. Back to you.
Okay, Edward, thank you so much.
So Iran tried to use Hormuz like a choke chain, and 145 nations called a bluff. Now, watch how Gulf states are building around Tehran with pipelines and export routes that cut leverage down even more.
Is Iran overplaying its hand in the Strait of Hormuz? In recent months, Iran has repeatedly threatened to use the Strait of Hormuz to put pressure on the global economy. But those threats are now pushing countries to speed up plans and spend big to bypass the strait altogether. Before the conflict, about 20% of the world's oil flowed through this narrow waterway. Iran agreed to reopen the strait under the ceasefire, but it still appears determined to control who passes through, even attacking ships that haven't received Iranian approval. And the more it treats an international shipping lane like a toll road, the more incentive other countries have to build routes around it. Saudi Arabia is already sending millions of barrels of oil each day through its east-west pipeline to the Red Sea. Other shipping companies are relying more on overload routes and feeder ports. And the UAE is moving oil by smaller tankers outside the Strait of Hormuz before transferring it to larger ships. And the bigger story here is what's going to happen over the next few years. According to Goldman Sachs, by the end of next year, new and existing pipelines could allow nearly half of all Persian Gulf oil exports to completely bypass the Strait of Hormuz. The UAE and Iraq are also building new pipelines, and the UAE is developing a major new export port that avoids the strait. Now, the Strait of Hormuz will still matter, especially for most of Qatar's natural gas exports. By using the strait as leverage, Iran may be quickening the speedy decline of that very leverage. The more dangerous and unreasonable Hormuz becomes, the faster countries will invest in routes that bypass both the strait and Iranian control for good.
So that's the bigger hit to the mullahs. Every threat pushes more oil around Hormuz instead of through it. Now the Financial Times zeroing in on one route in particular, Chevron and Iraq looking at a Syria pipeline. So it's not theory, it's moving into projects next. Iraq's prime minister telling Chevron to speed it up and push more crude. Iraqi Prime Minister Ali al-Zaidi calls on Chevron to expand and accelerate its operation in Iraq to increase crude oil production during a meeting with CEO Mark Nelson in Houston. So while Baghdad pushes Chevron to move faster, there's another fight here at home. Who's cashing in when the prices spike? Tim Burchett goes straight at Big Oil, says the whole thing smells like a racket with Joe Rogan.
Big energy oil, we get zero. I know it's a commodity and I'm going to get lit up that oil's a commodity in it, the world market, but we get zero oil from Iran. Zero. We export oil right now, and yet the price is going through the roof. It's going through the roof because it can. They can. And I always say, well, how does that gasoline in the pumps go up? That's been they've already been processed, already been paid for. How does it go up exponentially just overnight, 20 cents a gallon or whatever? And how does that, and if that's because it's a commodity, and Burchett, you don't understand, how come that quart of oil that you at the hardware store doesn't go up like that? Wouldn't it, it's processed oil, wouldn't it do the same? And of course, diesel, your first cut, I think, is kerosene. And then it's diesel. And I've got a diesel dually, I filled it up yesterday, is over $100. It is the cheapest, it is the roughest cut. That's why you have these incredible filters, because it's dirty. And gasoline is the third or fourth cut, and it ought to be the most expensive, but it's not. I just think it's a racket. And every time they'll hold the hearings, and they'll come down there, and the oil companies will, they'll shake that money tree. They know how to do it on both sides of the aisle.
So his point is simple. Americans are getting hammered at the pump, even though we get zero oil from Iran. Next year, Trump's team make the case that foreign buyers are now looking to U.S. energy instead of staying hooked on the Middle East oil.
Well, President Trump, as soon as he came into office, declared a national energy emergency, created a National Energy Dominance Council. It's been a whole government approach within this administration. And the worst thing is if the president did nothing with what was going on in the Middle East and allowed Iran to be able to close down the strait, to be able to charge tolls, to be able to control what comes in and out. The strait is open because of President Trump's leadership. And long term, what you have right now is a lot of other countries countries that have been heavily relying on the Middle East for their energy supplies for a long time, now looking to the United States. They want to know how they could diversify their supply chain, get supplies from the U.S., understanding it takes less time for many of these Indo-Pacific countries to get their energy from the United States, and they have total freedom of navigation. So anyone who wants to look at this conflict that's going on in the Middle East, mid-range, long-term, this is going to be better for the United States than ever before because of unleashing energy dominance is not just big for us domestically, it's big for us as far as exports and helping our economy and national security.
So that's the upside of the energy dominance, less dependence on bad actors, more demand for American supply. But as markets watch the next move, reports now say the administration is weighing a much bigger military operation, and oil is already reacting. Kobesi letter. Trump administration has notified Israel that it's sending dozens more refueling planes to the country ahead of a potential massive offensive in Iran, according to Axios. Details include Trump is reportedly considering a massive offensive. Among the operations being considered are bombing Iranian infrastructure facilities like power plants and nuclear sites. President Trump could order the escalation in coming days. Brent oil prices surged towards $88 a barrel on the news. So the surge towards 88 is exactly why Trump's message has been blunt. If America's protecting wealthy Gulf states, they can cover the bill. Here's the president laying it out from the Oval Office.
Crazy. They are crazy. And we're not going to put it up. Yeah, I want to be reimbursed because we're protecting a very rich portion of the world. We're spending money. And so what we've done is we are going to be reimbursed for protection. We're protecting by the countries that we're helping. For instance, you look at the 5 countries. You have Saudi Arabia, you have UAE, you have Qatar, or Qatar as I always say, you have Qatar, Bahrain, and by the way, you have others. You have Kuwait and you have others, and they will do very well. But we think it's appropriate that we don't need them. You know, we have more oil than any other country in the world. When you add Venezuela, which has been amazing, which has tremendous amounts of oil that we control. When you add Venezuela and everything else, we have more than 50% of the world's supply. We don't need it, but we need it from the standpoint of protecting allies, et cetera, including Israel, including Saudi Arabia, including Qatar, including UAE. We're protecting all of them.
You cannot hold the rest of the world's economies hostage and throw sea mines in international waters. That line from the ambassador Waltz just torched Tehran's whole scam because the Ayatollahs and the Iranian regime didn't project strength here. They exposed weakness, and Trump answered with 145 nations crushing sanctions, collapsing leverage, and a world already building around them. So President Trump said, I want our costs covered. And he's right. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, every rich state under the American security umbrella just got the message that Trump protects trade, keeps Hormuz open, and refuses to play global babysitter for free. Meanwhile, Iran's rulers overplayed the only card they had. They threatened a choke point, and now Chevron, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and the wider region are building ways around it while 145 UN nations box Tehran in publicly. That is a win you can measure. Fewer extortion points for the mullahs, more leverage for America, more demands for U.S. energy. And if the media clowns who sneered at sanctions hate hearing that, good. Hit share, drop your take below, and make them choke on the number, 145. And that's Iran's 145 nation humiliation. It's exactly the kind of story that YouTube loves to bury. So text White House to 844-840-4963 right now. Next News Network is credentialed inside the White House, and we send nightly insider reports straight from the building to your phone before the algorithm gets a vote.